Oh, darlings, come closer. I'll tell you how a quiet woman named Lydia, me, learned that love can be a blade, and that the same hands that rock the cradle can also tear the cradle apart. This is just the first crack in the wall. Pull your chair in. I was 24 when I walked down the aisle in a borrowed lace dress, clutching wildflowers I'd picked myself because Mark said, "You look like spring, Lyd." His smile could melt ice, and I believed every watt of it. We said, "I do," in the little stone church on Maple Street, and his mother Cecilia stood in the front pew like a marble statue wearing Sunday black. She didn't clap when we kissed. She didn't smile. She simply stared at my flat belly, as if she could see straight through to the disappointment already growing there. The first night in the big house, 3 stories, wraparound porch, the one Mark promised would be ours, Cecilia waited for us in the kitchen. Midnight. She had a single candle burning. "Welcome, daughter-in-law," she said, the word daughter-in-law sounding like a curse. Then she slid a plate across the table, 2 poached eggs and a slice of dry toast. "Eat. You'll need strength to give me a grandson." Mark laughed, kissed her cheek, told me she was old school. I laughed too, because that's what good girls do. I swallowed the cold yolk and the colder warning. The house itself was beautiful in the way old money is beautiful. Polished wood, heavy drapes, portraits of men with Cecilia's same hawk nose. But every room had her fingerprints. She decided menus, laundry days, even which side of the bed I was allowed to sleep on. "Guests on the left," she said, as if I were temporary. Mark worked long hours at the firm downtown, coming home smelling of paper and other people's secrets. I'd wait up with warm milk and questions he never answered. "Mother just wants what's best," he'd murmur, rolling away. I told myself love meant patience. Then Ava arrived, pink and squalling, with my dark curls and Mark's gray eyes. I thought the heavens had opened. I thought Cecilia would soften. Instead, she stood over the bassinet, lips thin. "A girl?" she sighed, as if I'd delivered a bill instead of a baby. Well, one must make do. She never held Ava that first week, not once. The taunt started small, surgical. "Careful, Lydia, the silver's tarnished. A real wife would notice. That dress makes you look thick in the hips. Men like slim." "Ava's crying again. Are you feeding her enough?" "My boys never cried." I learned to move through the house like a ghost, bare feet so the floors wouldn't creak, breath held when I passed her door. I kept a notebook under my mattress where I wrote the things I couldn't say. Day 47. She hid my good scissors. Day 89. Told the butcher I'm simple. Day 203. Said Ava would have been a boy if I'd eaten more red meat. Mark saw none of it, or chose not to. When I tried to tell him, tears blotching my face, he'd smooth my hair and promise a weekend away, just us. The weekend never came. There was always another merger, another dinner with Cecilia's bridge club. I started measuring time by Eva's growth chart on the pantry door. Every inch she grew, I shrank a little more. By Eva's 5th birthday, Cecilia had perfected her art. She'd wait until Mark pulled out of the drive, then summon me to the sunroom. "Sit. China cup, no saucer." "You're letting yourself go, Lydia. Mark deserves beauty. If you can't give him a son, at least give him pride." Then she'd produce a magazine, open to some airbrushed model, and slide it across the table like evidence. I'd nod, blink hard, escape to the laundry room where the dryer's rumble swallowed my sobs. Ava watched it all with those storm cloud eyes. At 7 she asked, "Why does Grandma pinch you when Daddy's not looking?" I lied. "She's checking if I'm strong enough to carry the groceries." At 10, Ava stopped asking. She learned the same silent footsteps I had. We became 2 shadows orbiting the same cold sun. The worst day, the one that still claws my sleep, was Eva's 12th birthday. I'd saved for months to buy her a real bicycle, sky blue with a white basket. I hid it in the garage, wrapped in a quilt. Cecilia found it first. When Eva ran outside, ribbon in her hair, the quilt lay empty on the concrete. Later, I found the bike chained to the tool shed, tires slashed, a note taped to the seat. Girls don't need wheels. They need manners. GM. That night I stood in the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing at skin that felt borrowed. I whispered to the drain, "I will leave. I will take Eva and we will vanish." But where? With what? My name wasn't on a single bank account. My high school diploma gathered dust in Cecilia's attic. I had $40 in a cookie jar shaped like a pig. So I stayed, and hated myself for staying. 17 years. That's how long I polished the cage bars. 17 years of swallowing glass smiles, of teaching Eva to say, "Yes, grandmother," while her fists clenched under the table. 17 years of watching Mark age into a man who kissed his mother's cheek before he kissed mine. Then one Tuesday in October, the cage door swung open in the cruelest way possible. But that's for the next cup of tea, loves. My throat's raw, and the kettle's whistling again. When you're ready, I'll tell you how Death walked in wearing Mark's favorite tie, and how the will he left behind turned every tear I'd cried into gunpowder. Close the door on your way out. Cecilia always hated drafts. It was the little things first, the way rot starts in fruit you can't see. A missing hairbrush, my favorite blue sweater suddenly too small. Turns out Cecilia had accidentally washed it in boiling water. Then the mistakes I never made became public trials. I'd set the table for 6 when only 5 were coming, and Cecilia would ring the crystal bell she kept by her plate. Ding, 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 like a judge's gavel. See, even the china knows she doesn't belong. Mark would chuckle, embarrassed for me, never for her. Eva, 13 then, would stare at her peas until they cooled into gray moons. I started keeping a calendar of humiliations. March 14th, told the mailman I can't read the big words on the tax forms. April 3rd invited her bridge club to observe Lydia's pathetic attempt at lemon meringue. May 19th, announced at Sunday dinner that Ava's B in algebra was proof the girl inherited her mother's empty skull. I'd lie awake counting the cracks in the ceiling, mapping them like escape routes. Mark slept beside me, snoring soft as a child. Sometimes I'd press my ear to his chest, listening for the boy I married. All I heard was the echo of his mother's voice. The day Ava turned 14, Cecilia decided the girl needed refining. She marched into the kitchen while I was kneading bread, flour to my elbows, radio humming Ella Fitzgerald, and declared, "She'll take etiquette lessons, posture, conversation, the works. We can't have her slouching like a field hand." The lessons cost $120 an hour, my grocery money. I opened my mouth. No sound came. Cecilia smiled the way a cat smiles at a bird with a broken wing. Mark already approved the check. That night, Ava came home from her first class, spine straight as a ruler, eyes glassy. "Grandma says I curtsy like a milkmaid," she whispered. I wanted to burn the curtsy out of her, but all I could do was braid her hair and promise it would be over soon. Lies taste like copper. The family dinners became theater. Cecilia cast herself as director, Mark as the distracted king, me as the clown. She'd wait until my fork was halfway to my mouth, then, "Lydia, darling, elbows, and chew with your lips closed. We're not barn animals." Eva's cheeks would flame. Mark would clear his throat, change the subject to interest rates. I'd swallow the food, the shame, the scream. One Sunday in July, the heat thick as syrup, Cecilia decided to help with Ava's summer reading list. She replaced Little Women with a leather-bound tome titled The Duties of a Proper Wife. Ava, 15 now, read 3 pages and hurled it across the room. Cecilia slapped her, open palm, sharp as a gunshot. The sound cracked something inside me. I flew across the dining room, flour still on my hands from the pie I'd been rolling. Touch her again and I'll— "You'll what?" Cecilia's eyes glittered. "Leave? With what army, Lydia? Your famous charm?" Mark walked in, tie loosened, briefcase swinging. "Mother, please. Lydia, apologize. Apologize for protecting my child." I looked at Ava's red cheek, at the book bleeding pages on the rug, and I did it. "I'm sorry," I said to the floorboards. Ava ran upstairs. The pie burned. Nobody ate dessert. After that, Eva stopped meeting my eyes. She'd duck into her room the second Cecilia's shadow crossed the hallway. I'd leave little notes under her pillow. "You are enough. You are enough." But they came back unread. Edges curled like dying leaves. I tried once more with Mark. Cornered him in the garage, smell of motor oil and cut grass. "She's breaking us," I said, voice shaking. She hit Ava. He rubbed the back of his neck, the way he did when clients were difficult. "Mother's under stress. The firm's expanding. Just try harder." Lid. For Ava. Try harder? As if love were a muscle I hadn't flexed enough. The calendar kept filling. August 11th, Cecilia accidentally donated my wedding dress to the church rummage sale. September 3rd, told Ava's guidance counselor I was unstable, suggested therapy for the girl. October 28th, locked me out in the rain when I forgot to buy her imported figs. I began hiding in the attic. There was a dormer window that looked over the maple trees, and I'd sit on an old trunk, knees to chest, counting the red leaves as they fell. 1 for every time I'd failed Ava. 2 for every time I'd failed myself. The trunk smelled of cedar and secrets. Sometimes I'd pry it open. Mark's childhood trophies, yellowed report cards, a stack of letters tied with blue ribbon. I never read them. Some invasions, even I couldn't stomach. Ava's 16th birthday was the night the house itself seemed to choose sides. I'd baked a chocolate cake, 3 layers, ganache shining like a promise. Cecilia waited until the candles were lit, then produced a store-bought sheet cake, grocery store roses wilting in the heat. "Professionals know best," she announced. Ava blew out my candles anyway, but the frosting on Cecilia's cake was the one she cut. I stood in the kitchen doorway, holding my ruined masterpiece, wax dripping onto my wrists like hot tears. Later, Eva found me scraping burnt sugar into the trash. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "For what, baby?" "For everything." She hugged me quick, then fled. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, watching the cake sink in on itself like my heart. The final stitch in the seam came the week before Eva's 17th birthday. Cecilia decided the girl needed a debut. White dress, string quartet, the works. Cost my entire savings from selling jams at the farmer's market. I begged Mark to stop it. He wrote the check. Ava wore the dress like armor, smiled for photographs that would hang in Cecilia's Hall of Triumphs. I stood in the back, clutching a paper cup of punch, invisible. That night, I found Eva in the laundry room, scrubbing grass stains from the hem. "It's ruined," she said, voice flat. "Nothing's ruined," I lied. She looked up, eyes ancient. "You say that about everything." I reached for her, but she stepped back. The space between us was wider than the Grand Canyon, and Cecilia had built the bridge we couldn't cross. The kettle's screaming again. Let it. Some stories need steam to rise. When you're ready, say next, and I'll tell you how Mark's heart stopped in a boardroom, how the ambulance lights painted our driveway red, and how Cecilia smiled at the funeral like a woman who'd finally won. I'm still here, rocking. The porch lights on. The contempt sharpened into something surgical. A scalpel slipped between ribs when no one was looking. Cecilia never raised her voice anymore. She didn't need to. A lifted eyebrow, a soft exhale through the nose, the way she folded her napkin into perfect thirds. Each gesture said I was less than the dust under her patent heels. Mornings began with inspection. She'd stand in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, while I cracked eggs into the bowl. Too much shell, Lydia. Mark can't digest grit. The eggs were for Eva's lunch. Mark ate cereal at his desk. I learned to crack them one-handed, the way jugglers do, so the other hand could hide the tremor. Groceries became battlegrounds. Cecilia handed me a list written in fountain pen purple: quail eggs, white truffles, saffron threads. A proper wife elevates her table. The total came to $300. My household allowance was $80. I stood in the gourmet aisle, clutching a carton of brown eggs, calculating which bill I could skip. She knew. She always knew. When I came home with substitutes, she'd sigh theatrically, open the pantry, and point. See? Mediocrity breeds mediocrity. She invited neighbors for tea on Thursdays. I'd spend the morning polishing silver I wasn't allowed to use, ironing linens starched stiff as cardboard. Then she'd seat me at the far end of the table, the wobbly chair, and introduce me as Mark's little project. The women tittered behind gloved hands. I poured Darjeeling with a steady wrist and counted heartbeats until they left. One afternoon, Mrs. Halverson asked about Eva's college fund. Cecilia answered before I could open my mouth. Oh, we're guiding her towards something practical. Secretarial, perhaps. Not everyone's cut out for university. I smiled so hard, my cheeks cramped. The telephone was her favorite weapon. She'd dial her sister in Sarasota while I dusted the banister, speaker on. Yes, still no grandson. The girl's pretty enough, but empty upstairs. Lydia tries. Bless her, but you know what they say about silk purses and sow's ears. I'd grip the rag until my knuckles went white, pretending I couldn't hear. Eva heard. She started taking the cordless to her room. Door locked. Cecilia orchestrated errands designed to fail. Pick up my dry cleaning before 3, dear, and the pharmacy closes at 4. 2 ends of town, 1 car, Mark gone to Chicago. I'd sprint through traffic, sweat plastering my blouse, only to find the cleaners had closed early for inventory. When I returned empty-handed, she'd be on the porch swing, lemonade sweating in her hand. Predictable, she'd murmur, fanning herself with the ticket stub I'd forgotten to collect. She rewrote my history in front of strangers. At the garden club, Lydia grew up in that awful trailer park off Route 9. We're civilizing her, slowly. I'd never lived in a trailer. My parents rented a brick ranch with green shutters, but the lie stuck. I saw it in the sideways glances, the way women stepped back when I reached for the punch bowl. Physical space shrank. She moved my sewing basket from the sunroom to the basement. Clutter invites moths. My books migrated to the attic. Romance novels rot the brain. One winter, she replaced our mattress with a twin for Mark's bad back, relegating me to the guest room with the lumpy futon. I lay awake listening to the radiator clank, counting the nights since Mark had touched me with anything warmer than duty. Eva's wardrobe came under fire. Cecilia replaced the jeans I'd bought with pleated skirts and Peter Pan collars. Young ladies don't advertise. Ava wore them like a prisoner's uniform, rolling the waistbands the second the school bus turned the corner. I found the jeans hidden under her mattress, tags still on, price stickers screaming my sacrifice. The breaking point arrived disguised as a dinner party. Cecilia decided to host Mark's new boss. 12 people, 4 courses, Crystal I hadn't seen since our wedding. She handed me the menu at dawn. Coquille Saint-Jacques, Duc à l'orange, Sherry's Jubilee. Ingredients I'd never heard of, let alone cooked. Instructions are in the cookbook on the top shelf, she said, already walking away. The cookbook was in French. I spent the day in a haze of panic, translating with a pocket dictionary, burning butter, dropping scallops into sinks of ice water to stop the cooking. Eva peeled potatoes beside me, silent. At 6:30, the guests arrived. I was still in my apron, hair escaping its bun, flour on my cheek like war paint. Cecilia glided past in emerald silk. Lydia, the kitchen, now. The first course went out lukewarm. The duck bled when carved. The cherries caught fire, literally. Flames licked the ceiling, while Cecilia shrieked about insurance. Mark's boss laughed it off, but Cecilia waited until the last taillight disappeared before turning on me. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time." Her voice was low, lethal. "Pack a bag. Sleep at the motel on 5th. Come back when you've learned competence." Mark stood in the doorway, tie askew. "Mother, it was an accident." "Accidents are for children, Mark. She's had 17 years. I looked at Eva, expecting rescue. She stared at the floor, arms wrapped around herself. The silence was a vote. I walked upstairs on legs that didn't feel like mine, stuffed underwear and a toothbrush into a grocery bag, and left through the side door. The night air tasted like freedom and terror. I drove to the Starlight Motel, neon buzzing like a migraine. Room 12 smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. I sat on the chenille bedspread and cried until my ribs ached. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Mark, Mother's calmed down. Come home. No apology. No I love you." I turned it off and watched the crack in the ceiling spiderweb across the plaster. Morning found me at the diner across the street, nursing coffee refills I couldn't afford. The waitress, name tag Doris, slid into the booth opposite me. "Rough night, hon." I spilled it all. The duck, the fire, the exile. She listened without flinching, then pushed a plate of hash browns my way. "Eat, then decide if that house is worth your soul." I ate. The potatoes tasted like possibility. When I looked up, Eva stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas, eyes swollen. She slid in beside me, laid her head on my shoulder. "I looked for you everywhere," she whispered. "Grandma said you left for good." "I almost did," I said. My voice cracked like thin ice. We sat until the breakfast rush, 2 refugees in a vinyl booth. Outside, the sun climbed over the rooftops, gilding the cracked parking lot. For the first time in years, no one was watching, waiting for me to fail. But Cecilia wasn't finished. She'd only begun to tighten the noose. "Next, when you're ready." The motel bed sagged in the middle, a valley that swallowed me whole. I woke every hour, convinced I heard Cecilia's heels clicking down the hallway, keycard ready. By the 3rd night, I stopped jumping at shadows and started listening to the couple in room 14 fighting through the wall, her voice rising, his silence louder than any shout. Their anger sounded honest. Mine had been buried so long, it felt like a foreign language. I kept the grocery bag packed, toothbrush on top in case Mark changed his mind and came to fetch me. He didn't. Instead, texts arrived like polite grenades. Mother says, "Give it a week. Ava misses you, but school's busy. Try to understand her stress. Understand." As if Cecilia's stress were a tide I could swim against. Ava came on the 4th day, sneaking out after curfew. She brought my winter coat and a Tupperware of lasagna I'd frozen months ago. We sat on the motel's back steps, sharing the cold pasta with plastic forks. "Grandma rearranged your closet," she said, mouth full. "Moved everything to the back. Says it's storage now." I laughed until I cried. Lasagna saltier with tears. Back home, the house had rules I no longer fit. I returned on a Tuesday, tail between legs, to find my key didn't work. Cecilia met me at the door in a silk robe the color of dried blood. "Spares in the frog," she said, pointing to the ceramic amphibian by the mat. "Try not to lose it again." She didn't step aside. I had to brush past her, smelling her rosewater and victory. My side of the closet was indeed storage. Boxes of Mark's old tax returns, Christmas decorations, a single high heel I didn't recognize. My clothes hung in the guest room, pressed between mothballs. The message was clear. Temporary. I folded myself into the narrow bed and listened to the radiator hiss like an angry cat. Ava tiptoed in after midnight. "I saved your pillow," she whispered, sliding it under my arm. It smelled of our old detergent, the one Cecilia banned for being cheap. We lay face to face in the dark, knees touching. "She makes me call her ma'am now," Ava said, "like I'm the help." I wanted to promise it would stop, but promises felt like lies wearing Sunday clothes. Mornings, I woke before dawn to reclaim the kitchen. I'd brew coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, scramble eggs with chives from the windowsill, leave a plate warming for Eva. Cecilia would drift in at 8, inspect the skillet, and scrape my efforts into the trash. "Grease clogs arteries," she'd say without looking at me. The plate went into the dishwasher untouched. I started eating standing up, over the sink like a thief. Parent-teacher night was the next landmine. Eva's history teacher wanted to discuss her college essay. I ironed a blouse, practiced smiling in the mirror. Cecilia intercepted me at the door. "I'll handle it. You embarrass her with your enthusiasm." She wore my good coat, the camel one I'd saved 6 months to buy. Ava looked at me, pleading. I handed over the car keys. They returned with ice cream cones and stories of how Grandma charmed Mr. Patel. My name never came up. The hatred settled into my bones, a low-grade fever. I caught it in glances, Cecilia's friends at the grocery store, the way the butcher weighed my chicken with pity. I caught it in Eva's silences, the way she flinched when I reached to smooth her hair. I caught it in the mirror, eyes ringed purple, mouth set in a line I didn't recognize. I tried small rebellions. I bought daisies at the farmer's market, arranged them in a jelly jar on the windowsill. Cecilia dumped them in the compost. Weeds breed pests. I played Billie Holiday on the kitchen radio. Cecilia unplugged it mid-chorus. Noise aggravates migraines. I wore the red lipstick I'd hidden since our honeymoon. She handed me a tissue. "You look like a streetwalker. Wash it off." Mark noticed none of it. He came home later, left earlier, kissed the air beside my cheek. When I cornered him in the laundry room, dryer tumbling like my thoughts, he sighed. "You're exaggerating, Lyd. Mother's old. Let's not upset the apple cart." The apple cart, as if our life were fruit balanced on a string. Ava stopped eating dinner with us. She'd take a tray to her room, door locked, music bleeding through the walls. I'd stand outside with a second fork, listening to her cry between songs. Once I knocked. "Go away," she said, voice muffled. "Please." I went. The hallway stretched longer than the house itself. I started walking at night. Past the sleeping lawns, past the 7-Eleven glowing like a spaceship, past the high school where Eva would graduate without me in the front row. I walked until my legs burned, until the cold numbed the rage. One February night, snow just starting to stick, I found myself at the cemetery gates. Mark's father was buried there. Cecilia's husband, dead 10 years before I met her son. I brushed snow from the headstone and spoke to the granite. "Did she do this to you too?" The wind answered with silence. Spring brought report cards. Ava's grades slipped. B's where A's used to live. Cecilia blamed me. Distraction at home. She scheduled tutors, piano, Latin, all on my dime. Ava's eyes grew hollow. I slipped her notes in her backpack. "You are not the problem." But they came back crumpled. The final erosion happened in pieces. My name disappeared from the mailbox. My book club invitation got lost. The church bulletin listed Cecilia as Ava's emergency contact. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting rooms I used to rule. One April afternoon, rain drumming the skylight, I found Ava in the attic trunk, the cedar one. She'd unearthed Mark's old letters, the blue ribbon stack. She looked up, eyes red. Dad wrote to someone named Claire, she said. Before you? The ribbon trembled in her fingers. I took the letters, heart hammering. Love notes, explicit, dated the year before our wedding. Claire, not me. I sat on the attic floor, dust motes dancing like accusations. Eva curled beside me. Does Grandma know? She knows everything, I said. The words tasted like rust. That night, I confronted Mark in his study, letters fanned across the desk like playing cards. He glanced up, annoyed. Ancient history, Lydia. Let it go. Ancient history built this house, I said. My voice didn't shake. Progress. Cecilia appeared in the doorway, robes cinched tight. Raise your voice again, and you'll sleep in the garage. Mark didn't look at her, didn't look at me. He closed his laptop. I have an early flight. I slept in the attic that night, letters under my pillow like a dagger. Dawn found me still awake, watching light creep across the beams. Somewhere below, Cecilia's clock chimed 5. I counted the strikes, each one a nail in the coffin of the woman I used to be. The loneliness was complete. Even Ava's love came with conditions now. Don't rock the boat. Don't make waves. Don't make Grandma mad. I was an island in a house full of people, and the tide was Cecilia's hatred, rising, rising. But tides turn, and coffins, it turns out, can be crawled out of. Mark died on a Thursday that smelled of lilacs and copier toner. He kissed me goodbye at 6:12 a.m., tie already knotted, briefcase swinging. Big presentation, he said, pecking my cheek like a habit. I watched his taillights disappear and went back to burning toast. By 10:47, the phone rang. The firm's receptionist, voice thin. Mrs. Harrington, there's been an incident. Heart attack in the boardroom, mid-sentence, coffee still warm on the table. They said he never felt a thing. I felt everything. The funeral was Cecilia's masterpiece, Black Orchids, a string quartet playing something mournful in a minor key, eulogies from men who'd never met me. I stood beside the casket in a dress I'd worn to Ava's 8th grade graduation, numb to the elbows. Ava clung to my arm, 17 and shaking. Cecilia floated through the crowd like a queen, accepting condolences with a hand pressed to her heart. My only child, she sighed, as if I were a footnote. Back home, the house exhaled. Mark's shoes still by the door, his coat on the hook, the faint cedar of his aftershave haunting the hallway. I kept expecting him to walk in, loosen his tie, ask what was for dinner. Instead, Cecilia locked his study and pocketed the key. Grief needs order, she declared. She wore black for exactly 7 days, then switched to navy. Mourning is for widows, she told the mirror. I'm a mother. The first bill arrived a week later, the country club membership, Mark's name still on the envelope. I opened it with a butter knife, hands trembling. $4,200. I had $312 in checking. Cecilia snatched the paper. I'll handle finances. You're in no state. She moved her desk into Mark's study, papers spreading like mold. My questions earned a raised eyebrow. Trust is a luxury, Lydia. You've never afforded it. Ava stopped speaking above a whisper. She drifted through rooms like smoke, textbooks clutched to her chest. I found her in Mark's closet one night, face buried in his sweater. It still smells like him, she said. I held her while she cried, but my own tears had dried into salt tracks. Cecilia caught us there, silhouette in the doorway. Sentiment is clutter. Out. We obeyed. The eviction notice came disguised as kindness. Cecilia cornered me in the laundry room, dryer thumping like a heartbeat. You've been a guest here long enough, she said, folding Mark's shirts with military precision. The house is mine now. Mark's will leaves everything to blood. She didn't have the will. I'd learn that later, but she had the tone of someone who'd already won. Pack by Friday, take the girl if you must. I laughed, an ugly bark that startled us both. This is my home. I painted these walls. I birthed Ava in the upstairs bedroom. Cecilia's smile was thin as onion skin. Details. The deed says, Harrington. You're a Reynolds by mistake. She walked out, leaving the scent of her talcum powder choking the air. I searched for the will that night, rifling drawers while Ava slept. Nothing. Just insurance papers, car titles, a life insurance policy naming Cecilia beneficiary. My stomach folded in on itself. I called the lawyer, got voicemail, called Mark's assistant, got silence. The walls pressed closer, whispering outsider, outsider. Friday dawned gray. Cecilia had hired movers, 2 men in gray coveralls who wouldn't meet my eyes. They boxed my life in under 2 hours. Books, photo albums, the chipped teapot from our first apartment. Eva watched from the stairs, clutching her backpack like a life raft. "Mom, get your things," I said. My voice sounded borrowed. Cecilia supervised from the foyer, clipboard in hand. "The furniture stays. Personal effects only." She pointed to the wedding portrait above the mantel. "That too. Mark wouldn't want it sullied." The movers lifted it down. Dust bloomed where it had hung for 17 years. I reached instinctively, fingers brushing the frame. One of the men hesitated. Cecilia snapped her fingers. The portrait went into a crate marked Donate. We loaded my ancient Civic until the shocks groaned. Ava slid into the passenger seat, knees to chest. I turned the key. Nothing. Dead battery. Cecilia appeared at the window, keys dangling from her manicured finger. "I had it disconnected. Wouldn't want you driving distraught." She smiled the way undertakers do. "There's a shelter on Elm. They take strays." Ava's sob broke the spell. I grabbed her hand, pulled her from the car. We walked down the driveway, boxes abandoned like shed skin. The gates clanged shut behind us. Automatic, Cecilia's final flourish. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The gravel cut through my flats, but the pain felt clean, honest. We slept in the Civic that night, parked behind the 24-hour laundromat. I reclined the seat. Eva curled against me, her breath warm on my neck. Headlights swept over us every hour, painting our faces ghost white. At 3 a.m., she whispered, "Are we homeless now?" "We're between chapters," I said. The lie tasted like hope. Morning found us at the diner again, Doris pouring coffee without asking. She slid a key across the table. "Cousin's rental. Above the bakery. Month to month." I tried to pay. She waved it off. "You fed me lasagna once. We're even." The apartment smelled of yeast and lemon polish. 1 bedroom, a hot plate, a window overlooking the alley. Ava claimed the couch. I took the floor. Cecilia's masterstroke came Monday. A courier delivered an envelope. Eviction complete. Personal effects in storage unit 217. Inside, a bill for $850. Payment due in 30 days or auction. My wedding dress was photographed on a mannequin, price tag dangling. I sat on the fire escape and laughed until I gagged. Ava found me there, eyes swollen. "She can't do this," she said. "She already did." I got a job at the bakery, 5 a.m. shifts, kneading dough that rose better than my spirits. Ava finished senior year online. Laptop balanced on a milk crate. We ate day-old croissants and canned soup, counting quarters for laundry. The apartment's radiator clanked like a metronome, keeping time for our ruin. One night, Eva came home late, cheeks flushed. Grandma called the school, told them I was truant. Suspension papers fluttered from her fist. I held her while she raged, then cried, then went silent. In that silence, I heard the old Lydia die, the one who apologized, who shrank, who stayed. Something harder took her place. I still didn't know about the will, didn't know Mark had hidden a fortune, or that Cecilia's empire was built on quicksand. All I knew was the taste of yeast on my fingers and the weight of my daughter's head on my shoulder. It was enough to keep walking. The storage bill loomed. Unit 217 held every photograph of Eva's first steps, my mother's recipe cards, the quilt I'd sewn from Mark's old shirts. I had $312 in tips. Auction was in 6 days. Little did I know the dead still had one card to play. The storage auction notice arrived on cheap pink paper, the color of Pepto-Bismol and Panic. I taped it to the refrigerator so Ava would see it every time she reached for milk. A countdown in fluorescent ink. 6 days, 5, 4. We stopped buying groceries. Day-old bread from the bakery became toast, then crumbs, then memory. I pawned my mother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd worn the day I was born, for $180. The pawnbroker clicked his tongue. Real shame, lady. I walked out lighter by 2 grams and heavier by a lifetime. On the 3rd day, I went to the storage unit alone, dusk bleeding purple across the sky. Unit 217's roll door yawned like a mouth. Inside, my life sat in labeled towers. Kitchen, Lydia, Holiday. Fragile, Mark's golf clubs. The wedding dress hung in plastic, veil drooping like a wilted flower. I pressed my face into the lace and smelled nothing. No gardenias, no hope. A yellow legal pad poked from a box marked MISC. I tugged it free, expecting grocery lists or Eva's old report cards. Instead, Mark's handwriting stared back. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Start with the safe? My pulse stuttered. We had no safe. I'd cleaned every inch of that house on hands and knees. I flipped the page, a combination, 142709, Eva's birthday. Beneath it, an address I didn't recognize, 412 Oak Ridge Lane, Suite B. A key taped to the paper, small and brass, glinting like a secret. I drove to Oak Ridge with the key clenched in my fist, bakery flour still under my nails. Suite B was a law office wedged between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Mrs. Harrington, we've been trying to reach you." She led me past frosted glass to a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and old money. On the table, a thick folder stamped Harrington Family Trust. Confidential. The attorney, Mr. Patel, young, kind eyes, tie too wide, slid the folder toward me. Mark updated this 6 months ago. He insisted on privacy. He opened to the first page. My name alone, in bold. Sole trustee and beneficiary. I laughed. A cracked sound that made Patel flinch. Pages turned like slow-motion snow. Brokerage accounts, rental properties in 3 states, a commercial building downtown, municipal bonds, a life insurance rider, payable immediately. The total at the bottom, blurred. 8 figures. Enough zeros to choke on. "There's more," Patel said quietly. He produced a second envelope, Mark's handwriting again. "Lydia, I was a coward. Use this to fix what I broke. Tell Ava I'm sorry I wasn't braver." A flash drive clipped to the corner. Patel inserted it into his laptop. Spreadsheets bloomed. Cecilia's gambling losses, offshore accounts, forged signatures on loans against the house. Mark had tracked every cent she'd bled from the family for a decade. The final file was a video, Mark in his study, tie loosened, eyes red. "If Cecilia fights this, give her the red folder in the safe. It's everything. Casino markers, bookies, a second mortgage she hid. I protected you the only way I knew how. I should have protected you from her. Forgive me." The screen went black. I sat very still, the key cutting into my palm. Patel cleared his throat. "The safe is in the Oak Ridge Bank vault. Mark rented it under your maiden name." He handed me a new key, heavier, colder. I drove to the bank in a trance. The vault smelled of metal and mothballs. Box 318 opened with a soft click. Inside, the red folder, thick as a phone book. A velvet pouch of gold coins, stock certificates, and a single photograph. Me and Ava at the county fair, cotton candy on our chins, Mark's arm around us both. On the back, in his scrawl, my whole world. I took the red folder and the photo, left the rest. The teller counted out a cashier's check for immediate expenses, enough to pay the storage bill, rent a real apartment, buy Eva a winter coat that fit. My hands didn't shake. They felt like someone else's, steady and sure. Back at the apartment, Eva was asleep on the couch, calculus book open on her chest. I woke her gently. "Pack a bag, baby. We're going home." She blinked, confused. "Grandma's house?" "Our house," I corrected. The words tasted like steel. We checked into a hotel that night. Real beds, hot water, a view of the river. I spread the trust documents across the desk like battle plans. Patel had overnighted copies of the deed. The house, the cars, the club membership, all transferred to me 2 years ago, quietly, irrevocably. Cecilia had been living on borrowed time and borrowed money. Eva traced the numbers with one finger. "Dad did this?" "He woke up too late," I said, but he woke up. Sleep wouldn't come. I sat by the window, watching headlights stitch the bridge together, then tear it apart. The red folder burned a hole in my lap. Inside, casino surveillance photos, Cecilia at the blackjack table, eyes wild. Loan documents with her looping signature, a letter from a collection agency threatening foreclosure. Mark had underlined the total in red, $2.4 million, more than the house was worth. She'd gambled away her future and planned to gamble away mine. Morning brought clarity, sharp as winter air. I called Patel. "I want the house back." "Today?" He hesitated. "Cecilia's still in residence." "Not for long." We drove to the house at noon, Ava silent beside me, knuckles white on the door handle. The gates stood open, Cecilia's car in the driveway, trunk yawning. She was loading suitcases, face pinched, hair escaping its bun. When she saw us, her mouth twisted. "Come to gloat over scraps?" I stepped out, red folder in hand. "Actually, I came to evict you." She laughed, but it cracked in the middle. "You have nothing. Mark's will is right here." I held up the trust. "Sole beneficiary, Lydia Reynolds Harrington, effective 2 years ago. You've been squatting." Her eyes darted to the folder, recognition dawning. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving powder and panic. "You're lying." "Page 7, I said. "Feel free to read it aloud." Ava climbed out, stood beside me. For the first time, she didn't look away. Cecilia's gaze flicked between us, calculating. Then she lunged for the folder. I stepped back. She stumbled, caught herself on the car. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I have debts." "Exactly," I said. "And collectors don't take IOUs from ghosts." Sirens in the distance. Patel had arranged a police escort just in case. Cecilia's hands fluttered like trapped birds. She looked suddenly old, small inside her camel coat. "Mark wouldn't." "Mark did." I opened the folder, let a casino photo flutter to the gravel. Her face, mid-laugh, chips stacked like a fortress. "Pack faster." She ran then, heels skittering, abandoning suitcases. The Mercedes roared to life, tires spitting gravel. Ava and I watched her disappear around the bend, taillights winking out like dying stars. We stood in the driveway a long time. The house looked smaller, almost shy. Ava slipped her hand into mine. "Are we really home?" "We're just getting started," I said. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and absence. I opened windows, let the breeze chase out ghosts. Ava ran upstairs, footsteps echoing. I went to the kitchen, touched the counter where I'd rolled 1,000 pie crusts. My reflection in the toaster looked unfamiliar. Eyes harder, mouth set. I smiled anyway. It fit. The red folder went into the safe I now owned. The photograph of the 3 of us at the fair went on the mantel, dust-free. Cecilia's debts weren't my burden, but her reckoning was. The first collector arrived at dawn, a thick-necked man in a cheap suit, leaning on the doorbell like it owed him money. I watched from the upstairs window, coffee cooling in my hand. He left a card wedged in the gate. V. Moretti, recovery specialist. Red ink, no phone number, just a wolf logo. I slipped the card into the red folder. Evidence. By noon, the phone started. Unknown numbers, voicemail full of static and threats. Tell the old bat the clock's ticking. I let it ring. Eva unplugged the landline, eyes wide. They sound mean. They're desperate, I said. Desperation makes noise. Cecilia had vanished, but her creditors had GPS. A black SUV idled across the street for 2 days, engine running. Tinted windows reflecting our maple tree like a bad omen. I took photos, time-stamped, added to the folder. Patel advised a restraining order. I wanted them close enough to watch. The mail brought heavier artillery, certified letters, final notices, a foreclosure packet on a condo in Vegas Cecilia had forgotten to mention. I opened everything at the kitchen table, Eva sorting envelopes into piles. Red for immediate, yellow for maybe, green for ignore. The red stack grew tallest, 2.4 million. Itemized, high-limit credit lines, pawn tickets for jewelry I'd never seen. A boat named Queen's Ransom now at the bottom of Lake Mead. Every line ended with Cecilia's looping signature, elegant as ever. She surfaced on the 5th day, voicemail left at 3:14 a.m. Slurred, breathless. Lydia. You vicious cow. Call off the dogs. I need the safe combination. Click, I saved it. Labeled Exhibit C. I didn't call back. Instead, I hired a private investigator. Ex-cop. Cheap office above the pawn shop where my pearls had gone. 2 days later, he slid a manila envelope across the bakery counter during my break. Inside, Cecilia in a Reno casino, hair dyed brassy blonde, stacking chips with shaking hands. Timestamp, 48 hours ago. Another photo, her checking into a motel under the name C. Reynolds. My maiden name, the insult sharp as gin. Debt, $87,000 and climbing. Ava found the photos when she came for lunch. She stared at the stranger wearing her grandmother's face. She looks small. She always was, I said. We just gave her a throne. That night I drove to the motel alone. Headlights off the last block. Room 12, same number as my exile at the Starlight. Poetic. I knocked once. The door cracked. One eye, bloodshot, peered out. You. Me. I held up the red folder like a crucifix. We can do this, quiet or loud. She let me in. The room stank of bourbon and menthol cigarettes. Suitcases yawned open, clothes spilling like entrails. A blackjack strategy card lay on the Bible. Cecilia sat on the bed, robe gaping, ankles swollen. How much to make this go away? Everything, I said. Sign the house over, the club, the accounts you drained. Walk away with the clothes on your back. She laughed, coughed, wiped her mouth. I have nothing left to sign. You have debts, I said, and I have proof. Prison's warmer than the street. Her hands shook as she reached for a cigarette. The lighter clicked 3 times before it caught. Mark turned you into a monster. Mark gave me a mirror, I corrected. You did the rest. I laid documents on the dresser. Quitclaim deed, confession of fraud, a pen. Sign, or Moretti gets your location at sunrise. She stared at the wolf logo I'd photocopied onto the corner. Her shoulders folded. The pen scratched like a dying insect. She tried one last barb. Eva will hate you for this. Eva's learning the difference between family and poison, I said. Class is in session. Back home, the signed papers went into the safe beside Mark's letter. I poured a finger of his scotch, the bottle he'd saved for Eva's graduation, and toasted the quiet house. The SUV was gone. The phone stopped ringing. Cecilia had crawled into whatever hole debtors crawl into, but holes have exits. 3 weeks later, a process server knocked. Polite, almost apologetic. Lawsuit, Cecilia Harrington v. Lydia Harrington. Undue influence, emotional distress. Damages sought. $5 million. I laughed so hard Eva came running. Grandma's suing us? With what? I wiped tears. Monopoly money? Patel reviewed the filing over coffee. She hired a contingency shark, claims you coerced her under duress. Let her, I said. Discovery's a two-way street. We countersued. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse, ironic, but the gambling addiction qualified. I subpoenaed casino records, bank logs, the Reno motel registry. Cecilia's lawyer requested mediation. I requested a public courtroom. The night before the hearing, Eva found me in Mark's study, my study now, red folder open like an autopsy. You're scaring me, she said. Good, I replied. Fear keeps you sharp. I didn't tell her about the second envelope Patel had delivered, Cecilia's offshore account, still active, $400,000 siphoned before Mark's death. Or the email from Moretti. We can make her disappear for half. I deleted it. Some lines even I wouldn't cross. Mediation day dawned steel gray. Cecilia arrived in a rented suit 2 sizes too big, lawyer sweating beside her. The mediator, a tired woman with a voice like warm milk, asked for opening statements. Cecilia went first, voice trembling with rehearsed grief. My son's widow stole my home, my memories, my dignity. Tears, artful ones. My turn. I opened the red folder, slid the casino photos across the table. Your client stole $2.4 million our forged signatures and gambled away her grandson's college fund. I added the Reno motel receipt, the pawn ticket for Mark's watch. Cecilia's tears dried mid-cheek. The mediator exhaled. Mrs. Harrington, your position is untenable. Cecilia's lawyer requested a recess. In the hallway, she grabbed my arm, nails digging. Call them off, Lydia. I'll leave the country. You already did, I said, prying her fingers free. This is cleanup. Settlement took 20 minutes. Cecilia signed away all claims, agreed to binding arbitration, and accepted a one-way ticket to anywhere I chose. I chose a women's shelter in Tucson. They had a bed and a 6-month program for gambling addicts. She left the courthouse in a cab, face turned to the window so no one would see her cry. Eva waited on the courthouse steps, scarf whipping in the wind. Is it over? Chapter 7, I said. Bankruptcy's next. We walked home through falling leaves, the red folder lighter by several pounds. Cecilia's name was mud in every bridge club, every bank. The house was mine. The debts were hers. And the future smelled like fresh paint and possibility. But old venom leaves stains, and some betrayals demand more than paper. The call came at 2:07 a.m., the kind of hour reserved for ambulances and bad decisions. Unknown number. I let it ring twice, then answered with the calm I'd practiced in the mirror. Lydia. Cecilia's voice, stripped of silk and left with gravel. We need to talk, now. I sat up in the dark, the house creaking around me like an old ship. You have 10 seconds. Face to face, she said. The old boathouse. 1 hour. Come alone or the girl pays. Click. Eva's door was cracked. Moonlight striped her bed. She slept, curled on her side, one hand under her cheek, the way she had at 5. I closed the door softly, wrote a note, back by dawn, lock up, and left it on the kitchen island under the salt shaker. I took the red folder, a flashlight, and the small revolver Mark had bought after a break-in scare years ago. I'd never fired it. Tonight felt like a good night to learn. The boathouse sat at the edge of the lake, half a mile past the country club, abandoned since the flood of '09. Moonlight silvered the water. The dock swayed under my weight. Inside smelled of rot and motor oil. Cecilia waited in the center, coat buttoned to the throat, a single lantern glowing at her feet. She looked smaller than memory, shoulders rounded, hair a white tangle. You came? She said. No triumph, just surprise. You threatened my daughter. I kept the revolver in my pocket, finger off the trigger. Talk. She lifted a manila envelope, thinner than mine. Compromise. You wire me $500,000, I disappear. No more lawsuits, no more collectors. Everyone wins. I laughed, the sound echoing off the rafters. You're bankrupt, Cecilia. Your lawyer quit. The shelter in Tucson revoked your bed after you tried to pawn their piano. Her mouth twisted. You think you've won? I still have friends. Bookies aren't friends, I said. They're landlords, and your rent's overdue. She stepped closer, lantern light carving shadows under her eyes. Mark was weak. He let you ruin him. Mark woke up, I said. You just never noticed. I opened the red folder, let a single page flutter to the warped floorboards. A wire transfer receipt, $400,000 from her offshore account to a shell company in the Caymans, dated 3 days after Mark's death. You moved this while we planned his funeral, while Ava picked out his casket tie. Her gaze flicked to the paper, then away. Desperate times. Desperate people beg, I said. You threaten. She lunged, not at me, at the lantern. Glass shattered, kerosene bloomed across the floor in a blue hiss. Flames licked the dry wood, racing toward the walls. I stumbled back, heat slapping my face. Cecilia darted past, envelope clutched to her chest, aiming for the door. I caught her wrist, spun her. You don't get to burn this down, too. She clawed my cheek, nails raking fire. I shoved her hard. She hit the wall, breath whooshing out. The revolver slipped from my pocket, clattered across the boards. We both dove. Her fingers closed on the grip first. Time slowed. The flames roared, eating decades of rot. Smoke stung my eyes. Cecilia raised the gun, hands trembling. Back off or I shoot. You won't, I said, stepping forward. You need me alive to wire the money. Her finger whitened on the trigger. I said. The shot cracked, deafening. Wood splintered above my head. She'd aimed high. Warning or bad aim? Didn't matter. I tackled her, knees in her chest, wrenching the gun free. It skittered into the flames. We rolled, coughing, the fire between us now. Help me, she screamed, crawling toward the door. Her coat sleeve caught. Flames crawled up her arm like orange spiders. I grabbed a moldy tarp, beat the fire out. Her skin blistered, raw and shining. She sobbed, a sound I'd never heard from her. I dragged her outside, both of us hacking smoke. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had seen the glow. Cecilia collapsed on the dock, cradling her arm. You should have let me burn. I'm not you, I said. Firefighters arrived, then police, statements under floodlights, blankets around our shoulders. Cecilia refused treatment until they threatened cuffs. I gave the red folder to the detective. Arson, attempted extortion, the offshore transfer. She was read her rights, while paramedics cut away her sleeve. Ava met me at the hospital, eyes wild. The note! Mom, I thought... She hugged me so hard my ribs protested. I smelled smoke in her hair. She'd driven the back road searching. Cecilia was admitted for burns and observation, handcuffed to the bed rail. Her lawyer arrived at dawn. Tie askew, face the color of oatmeal. Plea deal, he muttered. She'll confess to everything if you drop the civil suit. I looked through the glass at the woman who'd once ruled my nightmares. She stared at the ceiling, tears cutting tracks through soot. No deal, I said. Let the courts sort her. Back home, the house felt larger, airier. I opened every window, let the lake breeze scrub away the smell of smoke on my skin. Ava made cocoa, hands shaking. We sat on the porch swing, watching the sun rise pink over the water. She's really gone? Ava asked. For good, I said. Prison's a different zip code. The news broke by noon. Prominent widow charged in arson. Fraud scheme. The country club canceled her membership. Bridge club disbanded. Her name became a cautionary tale whispered over grocery carts. I kept the scorched tarp in the garage, a reminder. Some fires you walk through, some you start. Either way, you come out changed. Cecilia's trial date was set for spring, I'd testify, red folder in hand. But first, there was life to reclaim. The courtroom smelled of lemon wax and fear. Oak benches polished by decades of nervous palms, the flag drooping in the corner like it had given up. I wore the navy suit I'd bought for Eva's graduation, never worn, still crisp. The bailiff called my name. My heels clicked across the linoleum like a countdown. Cecilia sat at the defense table, orange jumpsuit swallowing her frame, hair the color of dishwater pulled into a knot. She didn't look up. The prosecutor, Ms. Delgado, sharp bob, sharper eyes, started with the basics. Arson, attempted extortion, wire fraud, elder financial abuse. Each charge landed like a gavel. Cecilia's lawyer, a public defender with dandruff on his lapels, objected to everything. Overruled, sustained once when Delgado called Cecilia a parasite in pearls. The jury, 6 women, 6 men, all taking notes, leaned forward. My testimony took the morning. Delgado walked me through the red folder page by page. Casino stills projected on the screen. Cecilia at the Bellagio, chips stacked like pastel cities. Bank transfers time-stamped the day of Mark's funeral. The Reno motel receipt with my maiden name scrawled in her hand. I spoke calmly, voice steady from months of practice in the shower. When Delgado asked how it felt to be threatened at gunpoint, I said, like waking up. The jury scribbled. Cross-examination was a circus. The defender tried to paint me as vindictive, a gold digger who'd manipulated a dying man. Isn't it true you coerced Mr. Harrington into changing his will? I smiled, small. Mark changed it 2 years before he died. Ask his doctor about the stress tests. Objection. Sustained? But the seed was planted. Cecilia took the stand after lunch. She'd lost weight. The jumpsuit hung like a tent. Her voice cracked on the oath. Delgado let her talk. About grief, about a daughter-in-law who'd turned her son against her, about debts she never meant to accrue. She cried on cue. The jury looked bored. Then Delgado played the boathouse video, security camera from the dock, grainy but clear. Cecilia's silhouette raising the gun. The flash, my tackle. The courtroom went still. One juror gasped. Cecilia's tears dried mid-cheek. Closing arguments were quick. Delgado. This defendant burned her own legacy to ash. The defender mumbled about addiction and diminished capacity. The judge gave the jury 2 hours. They were back in 43 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing in 6 weeks. Cecilia stood when the verdict was read, swaying. The bailiff cuffed her. The chains sounded like wind chimes from hell. She finally looked at me, eyes stripped of everything but hate. I met her gaze until she dropped it. Outside, reporters swarmed. I gave one statement. Justice isn't revenge, it's oxygen. Eva waited by the car, arms crossed tight. When I reached her, she hugged me so hard my spine cracked. It's over, she whispered into my coat. It's just beginning, I said. The house felt different that night. I walked room to room, touching walls I'd painted under Cecilia's sneer. The sunroom where she'd mocked my curtains, now mine to flood with light. The kitchen where I'd cried into dishwater, now mine to fill with music. Ava helped me drag Cecilia's mahogany desk to the curb. The garbage men took it at dawn. I waved like it was a parade. Sentencing day was anticlimactic. The judge, a woman with a voice like gravel, listed the counts, then the restitution. $2.4 million, payable from any future assets. Cecilia had none. 10 years in state prison, eligibility for parole in 7. She shuffled out without looking back. The shelter in Tucson sent a thank you note. They'd used Cecilia's confiscated jewelry to fund a new wing. I framed it above the fireplace. Ava graduated in June, valedictorian. Speech about choosing your family. She didn't mention her grandmother. The audience gave her a standing ovation. I cried into my program. That night, we ate pizza on the porch, bare feet on the warm boards, fireflies stitching the dark. I sold the country club membership, donated the proceeds to a women's legal aid clinic. The commercial building downtown became the seed for something bigger, an idea that had been growing since the bakery shifts, since Doris slid me that key. Cecilia's name faded from the society pages. The bridge club reformed without her. Someone spray-painted liar on her old parking spot at the club. The manager left it for a week before resurfacing. One letter came from prison, forwarded by the warden. Cecilia's handwriting, shaky now. "You took everything. I hope you choke on it." I read it once, folded it into a paper crane, and let it sail into the lake. The current took it under. Eva started college in the fall, full scholarship, pre-law. She left her bedroom door open, a silent invitation. I turned it into an office, walls painted the blue of Eva's old bicycle. The red folder went into a locked drawer, key on a chain around my neck. Some nights I still smell smoke in my hair. I shower it out, then stand on the porch and count stars until the past loosens its grip. The house no longer echoes with criticism, it hums with possibility. Cecilia's parole hearing is in 6 years. I'll be there, not for her, but for the women who'll come after, the ones who need to see that monsters can be caged. The light I stepped into wasn't at the end of a tunnel. It was the front door, flung wide. The first brick I laid with my own hands was for the shelter's kitchen, sun up on a Saturday that smelled of wet clay and coffee. I wore Mark's old work boots, 2 sizes too big, stuffed with newspaper, and a hard hat Eva painted with tiny daisies. The women who'd show up later, some with black eyes, some with court orders, all with stories heavier than my own, watched from the folding chairs we'd set out like church pews. I didn't give a speech. I just knelt, troweled mortar, and pressed the brick home. The sound it made, solid, final, echoed in my chest like a heartbeat I'd forgotten I had. We called the place Haven House. Not original, but honest. The commercial building downtown became offices upstairs, counseling rooms, a nursery with cribs donated by the fire department. Downstairs, we kept the kitchen open to anyone who walked in hungry. I cooked the first meal myself, chicken soup thick enough to stand a spoon in, cornbread golden from the new ovens. A girl no older than Ava at her worst sat across from me, slurping broth with shaking hands. "My mom used to make this," she whispered. I slid the salt closer. "Recipes on the fridge. Take it when you leave." She did. 3 months later, she came back to volunteer. Money flowed easier than tears now. The trust paid bills, but I refused to touch principal. Instead, I invested, conservative bonds, a tech startup Eva vetted, a co-op farm upstate. Returns funded scholarships, legal aid, a van with Haven House stenciled on the side. Ava designed the logo, a door cracked open, light spilling out. She drove the van on weekends, picking up women who'd missed the last bus out of hell. I kept one room for myself on the 3rd floor, small, north-facing, window overlooking the river. A Murphy bed, a hot plate, the cedar trunk from the attic, now holding blankets instead of secrets. I slept there when the house felt too big, when memories of Cecilia's voice crept through the vents. Most nights I went home to the porch swing, to Eva's laughter drifting from her visits, to the quiet that no longer felt like punishment. The nonprofit grew roots. We hired social workers, a therapist who specialized in family trauma, a chef who taught cooking classes as therapy. I took self-defense on Tuesdays, learned to throw a punch that could crack ribs. On Thursdays, I led a support circle in the sunroom, Same wobbly chairs, new cushions. Women told stories I recognized in my bones. The slow drip of criticism, the sudden flood of eviction, the moment they realized love shouldn't leave bruises. I listened more than I spoke. When I did talk, I told them about the boathouse, about the gun, about the brick I laid with shaking hands. The first one's the hardest, I'd say. After that, you build. Ava graduated law school in 3 years flat, clerking for a judge who specialized in domestic cases. She came home one Friday with takeout and a manila folder. Pro bono client, she said, sliding it across the table. Inside, a woman in Cecilia's old zip code. Mother-in-law from hell? Forged will? The works? Ava's eyes sparkled. Want to co-counsel? We won in 4 months. The judge cited our precedent in 2 more cases. Cecilia's parole hearing came and went. I testified via Zoom from the Haven kitchen, flour on my apron. She looked smaller on the screen, hair cropped short, eyes flat. The board denied early release. Lack of remorse, they said. She didn't write again. Seasons turned. The maple trees I'd counted leaves under now shaded a playground we built for the kids. I planted daisies along the walkway, Cecilia's weeds in full rebellion. On the first anniversary of opening, we held a picnic. Former residents brought casseroles, kids chased bubbles, someone played guitar. I stood on the steps and looked out at faces I'd fed, faces I'd fought for, faces that looked back with something like trust. Eva squeezed my hand. Mom, you did this. We did, I corrected. I still bake at 5 a.m. sometimes, when the world's quiet and the ovens hum like old friends. The bakery downtown kept my standing order for day-olds. I turn them into bread pudding for the shelter. The smell wakes the house, draws sleepy women to the kitchen in robes and borrowed slippers. We eat in silence at first, then stories spill. Laughter, tears, plans. I pour coffee, listen, pass the sugar. The circle widens. One morning, a letter came, forwarded from the prison. Not Cecilia's handwriting. A guard. She asked me to tell you the soup recipe is on the prison bulletin board now. Says it's the best thing she ever stole. I laughed until I cried, then pinned the note above the stove. The porch swing creaks under 2 now. Me and whoever needs the space. Ava visits with her girlfriend, a public defender with a laugh like wind chimes. We drink sweet tea and watch fireflies. Some nights I tell them about the motel, the storage unit, the boathouse. They listen the way you listen to thunderstorms, awed, a little afraid, grateful for shelter. I kept one thing from Cecilia's reign, the ceramic frog by the gate, spare key still inside. I painted it blue, added googly eyes. Kids hide treasures in its mouth now, marbles, dandelion wishes. The house is loud with footsteps that aren't mine, with voices that say, thank you, instead of, you're nothing. The walls hold new portraits, graduation photos, baby announcements, women in caps and gowns who once slept on our floor. I turned 60 last spring. Eva threw a party in the garden, string lights, potluck, a cake shaped like an open door. I blew out candles while strangers who felt like family sang off-key. My wish, let the light keep spilling. It does. Every brick, every bowl of soup, every hand held across a kitchen table. The woman who once shrank to fit a cage now builds rooms big enough for armies of the broken. I still flinch at sharp voices, still check the locks twice. But the flinch is smaller now. The locks are mine to turn. Cecilia will die in prison, they say. I hope someone brings her soup. The story isn't over. It never is. Haven House has a wait list. Ava's talking franchises. I'm learning Spanish from the night cook. The cedar trunk holds applications now, dreams folded neat as blankets. I started this tale with a cup of tea and a trembling voice. I end it on a porch that's finally mine, rocking slow, watching the river carry yesterday downstream. The light I stepped into wasn't a destination. It was a doorway I built, brick by brick, with hands that learned to hold instead of hide. And the door stays open. Darling, did this story wrap around your heart the way it did mine while I lived it? Tell me in the comments. What city are you holding close tonight? If these words moved you, drop a super thanks so I can keep pouring tea and truth for souls who need it. Your love keeps my porch light burning. On screen, 2 new real-life journeys wait. Women who rose like I did. Dive into my channel. There are dozens more. Subscribe, won't you? Until the next story. All my love and respect. See you soon.